and announce that it is a virtual meeting. And what we have is a presentation on return on environment. Before we get started, is there any reason we're not going back to in-person meetings?
I don't think the supervisors have discussed it yet.
Yeah, we might want to do that. I think it's about time.
I think we'll check with what the county's recommending now, but yes, I agree. We should talk about it. We'll get John on the phone someday.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So
And I believe Donna is going to introduce our speakers.
okay.
Thanks.
You done, Mike?
Yes, go ahead, Donna.
Okay, I would like to welcome everyone to this presentation delving into the West Vincent Return on Environment Study, an approach to develop a sustainable environment and economy. Our township has a solid history of land preservation and taking care of nature. But what we can sometimes miss when looking at these beautiful places is that they are providing invisible services to our community. This report explains that nature is an invisible economy, providing millions of dollars each year to West Vincent Township in the form of avoided costs. Our presenters will be Jeannie Ortiz and Thomas West. Jeannie is Senior Program Manager of Landscape Conservation at Audubon Mid-Atlantic. Tom is a Principal at Greener Planning LLC and a Certified Planner and GIS Specialist. He's worked with many municipalities in the region to develop plans and ordinances to protect resources and manage growth. He has worked in the past for the Chester County Planning Commission, and part of that involved working for the Federation of Northern Chester County Communities, Landscapes, the County Comprehensive Plan, and County Protected Open Space Program. The return on environment was paid for by the William Penn Foundation as part of their Delaware River Watershed Initiative. Kathy is going to have us all on mute tonight. After the presentation, you are welcome to verbally ask a question, or if you want to write them in the chat, I will try to keep track of that and I can ask for you. And now I can turn the screen over to Jeannie and Tom.
Thank you, Donna. I will share my PowerPoint presentation. Please let me know if you don't see this. Okay, good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Jeannie Ortiz. I'm with Audubon Mid-Atlantic. You may have heard of Audubon, Pennsylvania. We recently merged with Maryland and DC, so now we are regional, known as Audubon Mid-Atlantic. And I am here with Tom tonight. We're going to talk about the return on environment results. Another partner on the project was John Rogers of Keystone Conservation Trust. And as Donna noted, this was funded by the William Penn Foundation as part of a Delaware River Watershed Initiative, so this came at no cost to the township. Our ROE studies ask, what is nature worth? As Donna indicated, we put a dollar value on your natural resources. So imagine that you are in this 4-acre woodland. Something like this might look familiar. And if you are standing in it or walking through it, what benefits do you think the woodland is providing to you or the residents of West Vincent Township? Anybody want to just say what you think the benefit might be?
Clean air.
Clean air.
Sequestering carbon.
Yes. Couple more?
Stormwater mitigation.
Yep.
Producing oxygen from carbon dioxide.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, all of those. Did somebody else say something?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Diversification.
I'm sorry, I missed it.
Species diversification.
Yes, yes, thank you. Species of diversification, yep. So we We do ROE studies because there's no economic value placed on those benefits. So they're not really factored into your land use or policy decision making. But if Mother Nature did provide an invoice, it might look something like this for that 4.3 acre woodland that has evergreen and mixed deciduous forest. You might see a bill for close to $9,800 a year. That includes groundwater recharge, flood avoidance, erosion control, cleaning the air, some of these things that you already mentioned, providing habitat and species diversity, and sequestering carbon. And that would be about $9,800 per year for 4 acres. So as we know, for decades, we have been grappling with these types of problems: sprawl, stormwater, chemicals, flooding, forest fragmentation, lawn culture, air pollution, invasive plants. These are just a few of the issues that we really haven't solved over the last few decades. And a lot of it has to do with the way we've managed or not managed our natural resources. And also a lot of this can be resolved if we do manage those resources. Our ROE studies calculate 3 things. First is natural system services. And as we've already talked about, your natural resources are providing things like stormwater management, nutrient uptake, pollination, biological control, carbon sequestration, habitat. Your natural resources are also providing local recreation. I think we're all used to seeing tourism dollars, as they say, heads and beds. But in your township, in your area, what is local recreation worth? When you get out and you recreate locally in those natural resources that you have, you might buy sneakers that you need. You might meet a friend and go out for coffee or breakfast or lunch. So what is all of that worth to you locally as you enjoy things like hiking and biking and bird watching and nature walks and all the other activities that you enjoy outdoors without doing harm to your environment? The third thing that we calculate are avoided healthcare costs. Because we are getting out, those natural resources exist, and so they're attractive to residents to go out and walk or jog and just enjoy nature. So you're exercising at the same time and saving yourself some healthcare costs. The other thing we can do with return on environment study results, as shown here in the graph, is compare them. So in Lebanon County, we did a return on environment study for the whole county. And as you can see in the chart, agriculture in Lebanon County is worth about $350 million a year. Tourism is about $200 million a year. So when we did the ROE study and we compared the outdoor recreation numbers and the return on environment numbers as a whole, we can see that outdoor recreation was almost as valuable as tourism, and ROE overall was almost as valuable as agriculture. So it is comparable. It does have a large impact. West Vincent Township is in what is known as the Schuylkill Highlands cluster of the Delaware River Watershed Initiative. That cluster includes southern Berks and northern Chester County. So the partners in the DRWI, the partners include Audubon, Natural Lands, French and Pickering Creeks Conservation Trust, Green Valleys Watershed Association, Partnership for the Delaware Estuary. We're all working together on this, as we call it, DRWI. So the partners asked if we would do 5 return on environment studies. And in 2019, we did most of them, and West Vincent was one of them. So on the chart, you see the results for all 5 ROE studies. I just left it there in case you were interested. But West Vincent is highlighted in blue. So the results of your return on environment study show that natural system services are worth about $16 million a year. Your riparian or streamside buffers are worth about $4 million a year. Your local outdoor recreation on the low side is worth about $2 million, but it's expected that it's more like $8 million because the $2 million, that's a very conservative number. And your healthcare savings, because everyone or people outdoors exercising, is about $3.5 million. The beauty of the ROE study is that we can also map the data. And Tom's going to talk more about this when he talks more about the planning implications and uses of ROE. But we can map that. So what you see on the screen is the ROE data for West Vincent Township. The highest ROE tends to be around your wet features like streams, headwaters, wetlands. So what you see on the screen is in West Vincent Township, your highest ROE values right there along the streams. To me, it looks like gold on my screen or yellow. Your more valuable return on environment is the pink up there in the north, that more forested area. And then the valuable ROE you see in the light green. The other thing we can do with the data, and Tom did this for the map, is to show which parcels are protected and which ones are not. So if you go back and you look at that gold or yellow area, the highest ROE, we can show you on a map which lands are vulnerable, like that darker goldish color, and which ones are more vulnerable.
One thing I might add, Jeannie, if I
yeah,
can, at this
go ahead.
point, this map is one of the series of maps, and they're all in a GIS system that's online. The link to that is in the West Vincent ROE report, the report itself. It's a link that you can click on if you have just the PDF file, and it'll open it up. So these maps are nice. It's really nice to look at these at a township-wide level, but you can also zoom into them and parcels turn on and you get more information. So it's a great companion to the study in the sense you can see what's going on in your neighborhood or turn other features off or on. But I think it's a really good asset to have for West Vincent Township when they're looking at these details.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. You're also reminding me that in the report, hopefully everybody has a copy, the link to this map is in there. So you should be able to click on it. So there are ways to use and share the data, and I'll just give 3 examples. As part of the project, we also produced a fact sheet for West Vincent Township. So on the left is the front side of the fact sheet. It gives the numbers I just reviewed with you, plus some really pretty local pictures. On the right is what we call a green ribbon landscape map. So Tom produced this map, and he turned on the highest ROE land or parcels and overlaid that with your parks and trails and open space. So you can begin to see how all of this connects and how important this network is to the township for environmental health, biological diversity, and economic sustainability. And then at the bottom right, this is the backside of the fact sheet, just some recommendations for the community. For example, planting native plants, or having a plant swap, or encouraging people not to mow right up to the edge of their stream. And then finally, how to get involved by joining a township committee or an environmental advisory committee or a watershed association, just ways to get involved. The other exciting thing that we did in West Vincent Township last year was we launched a Plants for Birds program. I don't know if anybody here tonight participated, but William Penn also funded this Plants for Birds program. A colleague of mine, Kelly McGinley, and I offered free native plant packages to residents who were eligible. So first they had to be in the cluster, which is the boundary you see on the map. And second, they had to have a stream on their property, because the goal was to plant these free native plant kits on the stream side to protect water quality. So you can see that these plants landed in the highest ROE areas along the streams. So it's just an example how you might offer a native plant program in some of your high ROE areas to build and maintain your return on environment. These slides might look familiar. You have provisions for this in your codes. The next couple slides are from Natural Lands, my colleague Ann Hutchinson. And this is a subdivision. The land's been cleared. The project was designed and the houses were built. But another option is to use conservation design, where the environmental sensitive features are taken out first, they're set aside, and the development is built around them. So this is another way to maintain, protect, and build your return on investment values. And Tom, again, is going to talk a little bit about these tools later. And finally, the last thing I wanted to point out is an example from West Pikeland Township. They shared their return on investment study results in their newsletters. So they're also getting the word out about how valuable, from an economic standpoint, their natural resources are. And I believe Tom's going to take it from here.
Great, thank you, Jeannie. So Jeannie's given you a good overview of what's in your report for West Vincent Township and the process and some of the techniques that go into it. I wanted to talk a little bit about what to do with it. We call it putting ROE to work. If you notice in the report, there's the last chapter says that, and it gives you a good starter into it. But as a planner, and I'm sure you know that it gets very detailed in the ordinances and the plans and the tools and the processes at the township level. So in the report you have that was done by William Penn, it's just really what is ROE and some of the opportunities in describing it. It doesn't get into the details of what to do with it. We have done that in other communities, and I'm going to give you an overview of it tonight, give you a sense of what the township could do and how it could go about looking at using the ROE report and some of the opportunities and strategies in it to use it in your township. So there's really three areas I'm going to cover. The first one, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I would say it's one of the most important of them. And that's that the township can be an effective partner and champion of ROE with your residents. Most of the land in West Vincent, as many other communities, is private. So you do have some say over things that are being developed and capital improvements and things like that. But by and large, a lot of the impacts are going to come from either advantages or opportunities at the private, at the landowner level. So one of the things that Jeannie touched on, some things, the Plant for Birds and the fact sheet, that's an attempt to really get the word out. So the township can help a lot with that too. And you already do. There's a lot of things on your website that talk about environmental conservation and what residents can do with their property. But we found that as we get into the details of it, there's more and more a township can do. And that's what that fact sheet's about, is really the first part of it. And I know your Environmental Advisory Committee and Sustainability Committee put a lot of information out there too. But I'm going to talk more in detail about what could be done at the municipal level in terms of planning and ordinances and things like that, because there's a lot of details in that. And I want to give you a good sense of it, those parts of it, not to diminish you being a champion with private landowners. So the first thing we do, we want to talk about here is for municipal processes and decisions, the first thing is the significance. Why is it important? When we do ROE work in other areas at the county level, we talk about it and we talk about what are some of the challenges or the opportunities. And one of the top things is in Pennsylvania, municipalities have a lot of direct impact on land use change. So municipal ROE at the local level is really important because of that. Also, a lot of open space protection and natural resource protection come out of policies or initiatives at the township level. So especially in Pennsylvania and in Chester County, where municipalities are very active, ROE is a key thing for implementing it at the municipal level. So the land use, I mentioned open space and resource conservation, but also the emerging value of sustainable planning practices. I think West Vincent's out in front of most on that. That's an important thing. And also regional collaboration. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. The other thing to keep in mind is that approaches vary. Each municipality is different. It's one size doesn't fit all. So we can't tell you what we've done in this community and how to use it in West Vincent. You have different, you're at a different location. Some townships that are rural or urban or agricultural communities, they're going to have different strategies. And the other thing that why it varies is that they already have processes in place. So we're not looking at, when we do this, reinventing the wheel, but working within your existing processes and building on that or complementing it. The other part of it is understanding what the capabilities are of a municipality we're working with. So some of the tools you're already using, like conservation design and transfer development rights, many municipalities don't use that, possibly because it's more advanced and they don't have the capabilities. So those are some of the variables that come into play of what we look at when we're trying to say what's the best opportunities to implement this. But when we, as an overall standpoint, we use return on environment strategies and tools that define the value of resources to help implement adopted policies across the township. The second thing is incorporating strategies to protect or improve ecosystem services or natural system services, recreational activities and health benefits provided by the natural resources and open space in your key decisions and activities. And the third part is incorporating data, so the return on environment values and resource mapping, like Jeannie touched on at Green Ribbon Landscapes, and some other tools that we could talk about that we've used in other communities, like a site assessment tool for return on environment. Incorporating those into your processes to help the commissions and boards implement return on environment strategies consistently and as effectively as they can. So we're really looking at, when I talk about this, not creating a new ordinance or a new tool, but incorporating some of these objectives and strategies into what you're already using. And I'm going to throw out some ideas, and this is coming from a planner who's worked in Chester County for quite some time and somewhat familiar with West Vincent Township, but the devil's in the details. So I'm just throwing some ideas out there to help you start thinking about it. You would say you're off base with that, Tom, or we're not doing it that way. Really, in order to move forward with this, a lot more discussion has to happen and evaluation to
That's wondering if
say
you need this, Huss.
what works or
Use
doesn't
that to
work.
take myself.
Uh,
Are they seeing you? No.
when we get done the presentation a little bit.
Okay, so the little graph is showing a conceptual planning operations at the township, starting with the planning goals in the center. And these are just generic goals. I'm sure they're much more detailed. But the three main goals that we'll look at are implementing natural resources protection, open space preservation, and sustainability using ROE strategies. And how can that be done? So here's some initial ideas. If we can look at the next slide, Jeannie. If you can click on it.
Yeah, I'm trying. Let me, sorry, Tom, I don't know. It's it doesn't want to move.
Well, I can describe it. I have in my notes.
I can
we will need
also,
to-
yeah, why don't you go and I'll stop sharing. I'll try it again.
Sounds good. So we'll start at the top with the Board of Supervisors. So as in any township, the governing body helps set policy across the township, what the operations are and the ordinances and plans. So one of the first things with return on environment strategies that we offer as a suggestion is for the board to promote ROE value consideration in all township decision processes. We can get back to that, but that's an important thing, is just setting the policy at the board level. Another way to implement ROE by the Board of Supervisors is its resource allocation capabilities. So things that you're already doing and continue doing is monitoring open space and the funding that the township collects or provides for open space. That's something that I guess ultimately is at the Board of Supervisors level, although others are involved in it. Great. Okay, just go back one if you can, Jeannie.
Go back again?
Yeah, back once more. And then the last thing at the Board of Supervisors is development approval, and it goes back to land use decisions are key. So a lot of the other boards and commissions are involved in land development review, but ultimately approval is at the Board of Supervisors level. What we look for is to have ROE values, as Jeannie said, you know, that what's going to be gone or what are the avoided costs or the opportunities, so that that kind of information is available as it's being reviewed, but also is available at the board level when they're making the final decision on it. And then jumping to the Planning Commission on the next. So typically the Planning Commission's involved in planning and zoning reviews. One of the thoughts is to use ROE strategies at the Planning Commission level to help refine the comprehensive plan and ordinances. Now, I know the township just went through a comprehensive plan update with the region, so you're fresh off of that, but it's something that you can consider moving forward to help, and we could talk more about that at the regional level too, but the probably more key is what to do in your ordinances under open space. So in the right-hand panel, it looks at a little bit of a breakdown in your zoning and subdivision. Things that we kind of look for incorporating ROE strategies into are the districts and the tier standards of the zoning districts, the site and greenway standards, open space requirements, resource protection, unified development area, and TDR provisions. So there are things in zoning that if we're looking at how to use ROE effectively, those might be some things to look at a little bit closer. And then subdivision is, I think you have a really good process for getting at natural resources and open space using the 5-step design process. One of the things that we think's good is, Jeannie touched on it with the conservation subdivision design, is getting ROE information in place. And we have tools that we've used in other communities that can help just using that online map, hit a property, and it gives an evaluation of where's the floodplain at, how many wetlands are there, how much of it's wooded, things like that, and gives you a quick assessment for the types of things that you're trying to do in the site context plan, and then the resources and site analysis plan. Moving forward, let's go to the Sustainability Committee. Just general ideas again. What I can tell is they're helping out with the township a lot. They publish an annual initiatives report that gives a lot of good information of the status of things or where things are headed. We think that the ROE strategies would fit well into that report of one of the things that ROE can do is, as Jeannie mentioned, there's numbers tied to the resources and open space in the township, the ecosystem services, the value of them. Well, those change over time, and it's really, I think, helpful if you're using it to monitor it over time, and that's maybe something that the Sustainability Committee could help with. Also, continuing to promote the Greenway Stewardship Guide and monitoring other conditions, and then also maybe helping with looking at some of the resource protection in terms of energy, for instance, woodlands. As Jeannie mentioned, when you assess woodlands, there's carbon sequestration and also energy conservation opportunities. And that's something maybe that Sustainability Committee could look at a little bit closer. Then the Parks and Recreation Commission. Some of the things we've seen as useful is that in terms of recreation and healthcare, in terms of exercise, is to help monitor activity and needs, which I'm sure they already do to some level, but with the ROE numbers in mind and milestones to meet. Another thing that opportunity I think that might be useful to consider is, and we've seen this in other areas, is for parks to use the land and facilities as demonstrations for conservation stewardship opportunities like stormwater and use of native plants. And again, you're probably already doing some of that. But I think what we're talking about is tying it all together under one umbrella with what types of programs and how to move forward. Next one, Jeannie. Open Space Review Board, using the ROE values in the open space prioritization. I think they do that annually, is set that up. And I don't know if they do it or not, but the TDR sending zones, which is where the density is going from, is to look at maybe tying that into the green ribbon landscapes areas that are defined in your map under the return on environment report. And then last but not least, next slide, Jeannie. Environmental Advisory Council really continuing to do what they're doing is to promote environmental stewardship, highlight areas of concerns or issues like native plants, riparian and forest area habitats. Also under site review, I put a little tag up there on conservation action plans. Jeannie and I think this is a great tool. We don't do it, but we can help promote it. And it's a tool that you look at an area in the township and you go to their website under the Wildlife Action Plan for the state. It'll generate a report that talks about any sensitive ecosystems in that area. It defines them and also helps start with a conservation management plan. So it's a great tool that we think would be really effective. We're not selling it or putting it out there, but we're promoting it. And we think our tool, what we're doing, goes well with that. So we can give you.
Oh, sorry, if it's okay to mention, I think an example of the reports at the end of the ROE report.
Okay, and I have a screenshot here if we could look at it later if we want to. So I'll jump to the next slide. I know there's a lot there and we can come back to it. I wanted to touch on regional planning, and Jeannie already talked about this a little bit, but I want to talk about it in terms of why it's in some of the advantages. So if you can click again, Jeannie.
Yep.
So some of the advantages, just, planning and some of the coordination doesn't stop at the municipal boundary. And that's important, looking at watersheds and stream corridors and habitat areas and migration corridors. So the blue is the Schuylkill. If you can click one more time, Jeannie, the second part comes up. The Schuylkill Highlands cluster is shown there. And it shows the townships that Jeannie mentioned earlier, the 5 townships that we've already done return on environment reports for. And it's showing in those townships the green ribbon landscapes. I think the thing that's really key here is that you don't have to have the same ordinances and the same tools in place or even the same plan, but this provides a common framework. The green ribbon landscapes is really promoting certain practices that link together on riparian areas and upland woodlands and things like that. So that if municipalities use it, they may come at it in a different way in their ordinances, but they're hopefully achieving a common goal and objective, so that at a regional level, if they're doing this, and that's why I think the cluster, as Jeannie was describing, they wanted to do this, is that they're achieving some collective standards, even if they're doing it at each individual municipal level. So there's real advantages to that. Then the next slide, Jeannie. I wanted to mention here the strong foundation in our region for return on environment planning at the regional level. So it shows the 2 reports on the left, the one done by the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission and Pennsylvania Environmental Council and others back in 2010. And on the right, the one recently adopted by Chester County Planning Commission for return on environment. So it's not a new approach. There's a lot of interest in it at the regional level, and also a lot of good data that comes out of that. I would say that the analysis and methodology we use is very similar to these at its core. There's some different techniques and different ways they do it, but some of the information on natural system services and what they look at and recreation and healthcare are very similar. They don't really map the way we do. Like at West Vincent, there isn't a Chester County map of our ROE values or green ribbon landscapes, but they provide a lot of good data. We like to think we work within that and can help municipalities implement it. We do know you guys use it. You have it in your open space survey, references to it. So it's something that we're glad to see you're already using it. I just wanted to mention there's a good foundation for it here. Next slide. Also at a regional planning level, the Northern Federation, West Vincent's been very involved in them, and they've done a lot of regional planning and resource planning work over the years. Their regional comprehensive plan, their natural resources protection plan, their studies on water and wastewater and stormwater management across the region, and then the French Creek Scenic River. And lastly, and really important, I think, for the township is the Park Recreation and Open Space Plan that provides a lot of information for West Vincent on parks and greenways and other key important information to plan at the regional level. And lastly, and not least, is West Vincent is really gone forward with the adoption of a multi-municipal comprehensive plan, which I know I'm not saying anything new to folks in West Vincent. I think it's really unique across the county and the region for a region to really recognize the value of doing multi-municipal planning. So what's shown here is in blue, the Phoenixville Regional Planning Committee. You've adopted their plan, just amended it. It provides a lot of information at the regional level for land use, natural resources, transportation, open space, sustainability and utilities and other things. It also provides a forum to review significant development proposals and includes considerations of greenways, forests, and riparian areas. A really powerful planning tool. So Jeannie, if we jump to the next slide, I'm going to wrap it up with the three things. When the township asked us to say, how do we put ROE to work? we're trying to answer your question here. Continue to promote return on environment stewardship with property owners using things like what you're already doing on your website, but the fact sheet, things like the Plants for Birds sponsoring events that homeowners and property and landowners can use and really help you implement the strategy. So I haven't spent too much time on that, but I wanted to say that's a really important, one of the three things we'd suggest continuing doing or look at more. The second thing, next slide, is to incorporate ROE strategies and resources into planning your land use review and decision processes that I just talked about. And then lastly is to pursue or maybe promote opportunities to apply return on environment strategies at the regional planning level to better protect ecosystem or natural system services and secure a viable open space network. So I'm not sure we can say that in many communities, but I think we'd be remiss if we didn't say that that's really something, a key consideration for West Vincent, given the strong foundation of regional planning and your recognition that it's important to work with partners on things like this. And we think that even if they're not adopting it, that as we saw with the Schuylkill Highlands cluster, that some of them using green ribbon landscapes, French Creek corridors flowing from Union and Robeson down through your township. And it's important to try and promote that and work collaboratively, even if we're working not on the same, in the same county even. So those are our ideas. I hope we covered some of your thoughts, and we really appreciate the time being here. I'm sure you have questions and we'll be glad to talk to you about that.
Donna, do you want to say anything further here?
Well, I'd like to thank Jeannie and Tom. It's a lot of information, and you condensed it in a wonderful way. It makes me want more. I hope we can work with this going forward in the future. And does anyone have any questions? There's Kirk. Kirk R. Can you unmute yourself, Kirk?
Yeah, hi. My name's Kirk Reinbold. I'm the chair of the Sustainability Committee. I commend you on your presentation. It was wonderful. West Vincent is in the beginnings of a big push for clean energy. And one thing I was wondering, Our township emits, if you add the electric, the heating fuel, gas and the diesel for vehicles, we emit about 38,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide. The cost per ton in terms of environmental damage and health effects in terms of asthma is about $50 per ton. So that's about $1.9 million of cost. I'm wondering if you look at that at all in your analysis, because that would be a wonderful addition to what you do.
Well, Tom, I don't know if you want to jump in, but we do calculate the benefits of air pollution removal. So I think that's as close as we might come to it. Otherwise, as we've already talked about, maintain and build upon what you have so that you can do more to keep your air clean. But I think that's the way we do it in ROE, is just through that air pollution removal number.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that Jeannie's right. We're looking at what natural systems can do to remove it. Our plans don't look at generating it or trying to curtail that. I think that there's other goals and objectives, like I'd mentioned maybe agricultural preservation, that we see this study of working in conjunction with other studies. And we know that, for instance, the county's looking at its climate adaptation plan, and it has a greenhouse gas reduction plan in place. I think that it's something that we could look at of some metrics to consider as in terms of the generating and how much these strategies can help with that. But at current time, Kirk, it's, as Jeannie said, we're looking at things like air pollution removal and sequestration to absorb certain things.
Okay.
And they do go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if we produce more renewable energy on site or use more renewable energy,
Right.
that would reduce our air pollution.
Yeah.
As
Good
long as you're
points.
not removing your natural resources to get there.
Yeah.
No, we don't want to, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, could be a time where we want to plant more trees.
Yep. And you're building your ROE.
Yep. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks, Kirk. I don't see any other hands. Does anyone else? Barry?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I noticed in the recreational section, it started out as an approximate like 1.8 and then jumped to 8.2 on your calculation. Then in all the rest of the documents, it jumped right up to 8.2 million. Can you tell me how that calculation is made?
Yeah, I mean, I can start us out anyway, Tom. It's using what's called an M-plan model. We take the DCNR recreation participation rates and some other data, and we run it through the M-plan model, and it gives a low and an expected value. So as I mentioned during the presentation, the low is like the absolute most conservative number, and that it's more likely 8. When John Rogers, our partner from Keystone, runs that model, he also talks to local experts, which indicate that it's much higher than that very low number.
Okay. And that sounds good, but it really doesn't give me a really good answer on that, because I don't know exactly what are they calculating, like the use of the trails. What is it? Because most of our open space is through TDRs and things like that. People can't hike most of that stuff. That's private property. So there's very limited amount. We have the Brain Coed Trail. We have some trails and things like that, but not that much. Most of it's in private hands. We've just bought the development rights, and people can't just go traipsing across the private property. So you have a very small scope of areas. So how do they calculate it?
It comes, I'm looking at the methodology, and I'm going to put the link in the chat when I'm done here.
Cool.
It gets a little bit more into the details. It's talking about, as Jeannie said, it's using models that are done. So we didn't collect this. We're using models that are collected, in the state recreation plan is another source for this. It's participation in recreation at a regional level, and then breaking it down by community. So it's not necessarily everything just in West Vincent Township, but people from West Vincent participating in it or coming to West Vincent from other areas. And that's
Got it.
why there's a range that's given with this. It's really
So it's a very broad scope. It's not just West Vincent.
correct.
It's
Okay.
broader, but it's not statewide. It's more for your region.
And our region is,
It would probably be the southeast region of the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, DCNR. It's their regions, I think, that they break it down by. So it would be the southeast.
Southeast region encompasses what, 5, 6 counties?
Yeah, right.
Okay, that number makes sense now. Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I don't see any other hands. Oh, call in user 2. I guess you don't know your call in user 2. Person on a phone.
Okay, this is Brian Curry here. I'm going to kind of follow up with what Barry was talking about because I happened to look at that same table and it notes hunting is $207,000 approximately. West Vincent has a real small area that's allowed for hunting, chosen by our chief of police. You know, it is what it is. There's a camping value of $154,000, again, approximately, using the low values. And if I remember right, the township passed an ordinance against people camping on their property. I'm not aware of any camping facilities in the township. So that's, you know, okay, where does that one come from? And then when it comes to cross-country skiing, again, $111,000. I think I've been here for approximately 35 years now, and I can probably count on two hands the times that we've been able to cross-country ski, and I think I've broken out my cross-country skis one time in 35 years. So I'm looking at these numbers, and they look off. You just explained that they came from a model, and the thought that comes to me, you know, as an engineer who has used models in the past, is where is the validation for this model when the numbers seem to be so far off from the potential? Can you give me an answer on that one, please?
Yeah, sure. Again, it's a model. It's called the in-plan model. It does give the low and the expected values for the region, and that's expected to be sort of your slice of the region. In terms of hunting and camping and cross-country skiing, like Tom said, you know, people might be doing it outside of the township, but in your region. So they go cross-country skiing in French Creek State Park, or they hunt and camp somewhere else. But that's a close we can get to your local numbers for outdoor recreation. And we do start to dive into some of the changes that are, you know, ahead of us in terms of climate change and the number of times you're going to be breaking those skis out of your closet. But yeah, it's a regional number, it's a low, and it's expected. People are often shocked by that number. And I think that's part of our story, that it's much more valuable than you think it is.
This is Brian back again here. But this model, this report is tuned for West Vincent Township. If I go to out by Pittsburgh to go cross-country skiing, or, you know, in the Laurel Highlands, that doesn't affect West Vincent. And I don't see how that's going to return on environment in West Vincent Township.
Right. Again, there are two sets of calculation. One is tourism. I mean, you're going to Pittsburgh, might be more of a tourism dollar for them. And the second set of calculations is local recreation. So in that instance, it wouldn't be local recreation. It'd be more
Well, in other words, it sounds like what you're telling me is that the model comes up with numbers, but the numbers either they've never been validated to be applicable at a township level, or the numbers are picked up from the model, but the model's never been really validated in some strong way.
Well, it is validated to the best of our abilities. I think I mentioned John will call. He'll do his own interviews and he'll validate the data and put a local touch on it. So in that way, he does his best to validate the numbers.
And I want to point out that what we're talking about is recreation. So it's not based on, the models are different than for natural system services. Those come from land use conditions in the township, wooded coverage, things like that. This is based on recreation surveys that you can read in the report that I sent out of participation in this region. And then it's a range because it's not exact number, even though it's a model the way we're talking about. There's a range there to recognize that it's not something directly impacted or located in West Vincent Township, but there's an expectation that if we want to get the best numbers we can to have some value attributed to recreation, we're starting there. Because right now if we don't use it, we have no numbers.
Right.
And therefore it goes back to what we were saying earlier, that all of these things we're considering there's no value to it. And that's what we're trying to get a better handle on.
Right, because tourism is overnights and there's no sense of what local recreation is worth right now.
Okay, I'm going to turn back. I'm an engineer. I've used models. I've been forced to use models. They were validated, and I could show that they were correct. I'm looking at the numbers here. Well, it's a range. The range doesn't seem to meet the, that doesn't come in with the credibility point of view. And there's an issue if, there's the garbage in, garbage out. If you've got a model and you claim it's a model and it's good, but it really isn't, then the use of it and the outputs of it aren't really good. But I'm going to go and I'm going to stop at this one. And I want to turn to one other thing that's a little bit different. There's a lot of discussion about invasive species and that they're there. My thing is they're there. Then the question becomes, what are we going to do with them? And are we going to attack them on our neighbor's property? Are we going to require they be removed from our neighbor's property? I remember when the gypsy moth came through, the forests were severely affected. I'm going to say recovery because I don't like, I'm not sure it really is, has occurred in that we don't have these, forests with gray skeletons of trees anymore. We've got the spotted lanternfly coming through now. We've had the zebra mussels. We've got jumping carp. But going back to our local thing of invasive species, should we be tasking our public works employees to go out into the parks and remove all the invasive species in them? Should be they working along the roads, right of ways to, again, remove these invasive species that are along the roads so they don't propagate out further? I'm kind of looking for a plan to do something about them as opposed to invasive species are bad.
I think one thing we are looking at is starting to address vegetation types in the ordinances as development's occurring. And I know that's not what you're talking about, but if there's options or choices to be made for parking lots or areas that are being vegetated, that we would stress the importance of using native plants and avoiding using anything that would be considered invasive. And I think the list of invasives can be rather large in this area. Invasive means they're not, in some cases, native. So wildlife does not benefit by having certain types of trees planted They get no substance. They can't survive on those things. So that's the start. I have seen other municipalities where they have problems with invasives of Phragmites in marsh areas and things where they have aggressive mitigation plans. I'm not too sure about other strategies that are being used, but it's something that I think the township, it's a good idea to consider where they go with it. But what I'd say as a start is to look at what you're permitting in your landscape ordinance. And I'm sorry, I'm not familiar explicitly with it, but it may be that you are promoting natives over other species. That's where we would say to start at.
Brian Curry coming back on it. I see where you're going with it. I understand that. But one of the things that comes up here is that this is, there was a statement in the report of, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. If the best thing to do is do it right now. Okay. 20 years ago, before development came to West Vincent, these are great ideas. But if I'm looking at West Vincent today, the number of areas which are going to have additional development are really, really small. And so I'm just having a hard time. It's great ideas. We've got it in the zoning, but we've got all these areas that are developed that have invasive species probably in them. We've got the township properties with invasive species. I know the EAC has spoken about them, I believe, for the township property right there at 401 and 100, and not a lot has happened. So I'm looking for some more substance.
Well, I'd say they're great ideas that you have. I don't know that it's in the scope of tonight's discussion to come up with specific solutions. It's really the start to answer the question of how the township can start to put ROE to work. And I think, Brian, you're bringing up some really good specific points that require probably more discussion, more analysis of the pros and cons before the township's in a position to answer that question. We'll depending on who's involved, I think, planners would be involved in trying to get more specifics to address your point, but we don't have that at this point.
And maybe a primary point for West Vincent Township is restoration and building back the ROE. For example, that's why we were really pleased with the For Birds program last summer and the number of people that participated, getting those native plant packages and putting them along their streams and starting to build all of that back and the habitat back and the storm management back.
Okay, I've got some other areas, but I'm going to let it drop at this point. I don't want to go monopolize the conversation. Let other people take it away. Thank you.
Thank you.
And do we have any other questions? I don't see any more hands. No, okay. Well, I'd like to thank Jeannie and Tom, and you've given us all a lot to think about, a lot to talk about. Dave and I had a great time looking up our property on the map. That's really fun.
Nice.
So I encourage everyone to do that. You can find your parcel on the interactive map and check out why your property is important to our ecosystem. And
I just want to say thank you for having us, and I'm sorry about the PowerPoint glitch, but we moved through it.
You're a pro. You're a pro. All right, and thank you all. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kathy, we never adjourned.
No.
Sarah, I make a motion to adjourn.
And I will second it. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is Bernie here?
No,
He
I
was
think that was
asleep.
Barry.
I
That
thought
was
he
Barry.
left. Oh, that was Barry. Oh,
He was
okay.
asleep. He was passing out in the back.
All right.
Nice
See you
zebra,
guys.
by the way, nice zebra.
Thanks,
See y'all.
everybody. Take care.
Good night.
Good night. Barry, are you going to hang in with Brian to be the last person off?
Boy.
Sure, why not?
No, just because it probably keep Brian company.
Somebody has to. He's a lonely guy.
I think you and he make a great couple.
Why, thank you.
Brian,
you still there?
oh yeah, he's still there. He's calling user too. And
Ah,
probably iPad. He's probably also iPad. They come and go together.
Mhm.
So,
Okay, guys, I'm gonna
okay.
close out. So you all have a good night.
see you,
Talk to you
Kathy.
tomorrow, Kathy.
Okay,
Take
good night.
care. Bye. It says.